Hi again, everybody. I have a message here from Rachel, and here's her story. Hi, Ollie. I just discovered your channel today, and after watching the videos you uploaded this evening, I wanted to share my story. I fully intend on continuing watching your channel and contribute to your PayPal as soon as I'm financially able. It's clear you work for it. I only a month ago discovered the NPD label exists and is applicable to the man whose sperm begot me. I knew he was toxic, and I went no contact with him after about 3 years. But I haven't been able to move on. I think in part because I was still baffled by the insane, hard to describe assholishness. Ben is absolutely, positively an overt narcissistic personality. Boastful, arrogant, pretentious, conceited, overly concerned with image, status, and wealth, short-fused, indifferent to the needs and feelings of others. He epitomizes ONPD. Unfortunately, he did possess scholastic intelligence, though certainly not emotional, and he was a successful architect. So whenever he tried to convince us of his superiority, it was hard to argue. It's somewhat funny to think about this now, because I imagine there was an engineer of who he was envious. But I heard too many times to count about how engineers suck compared to architects because their jobs require no creativity. My mother, brother, and I were both his targets and part of his image. He dictated how we could dress, wear our hair, how our rooms had to be decorated, everything. He maintained absurdly high and often not voiced standards, and of course not meeting them means not obeying, which he means he gets to rage out. I remember every day the dread I felt as the time he was to come home from work approached, and the terror I felt when he didn't immediately grab his alcohol and leave us alone, when he looked for something to blow up about. Most of my childhood is foggy. I just recall that general feeling of impending doom. If we were in public where he couldn't rage out, he'd publicly humiliate us. He wasn't often physically abusive to me, and when he was, it was usually more embarrassing than physically painful. For example, I can recall once when I was maybe 7 years old, we went on a road trip, and he took his turn driving. He suddenly declared we couldn't talk anymore, without provocation. By that I mean my brother and I weren't being annoying by bickering or anything. A ways down the road after this pronouncement, I started to ask a perfectly legitimate question. Can we stop for the bathroom? He turned around and slapped me across the face. The fear and anxiety to permeate every aspect of my life today, as does the shame. He mainly gaslighted my mom. You can't remember anything. You're irrational. You're immature. Indirect allusions to her intellectual inferiority, and so on. He was overweight, but he shamed my mom and me at every meal. My older brother is deaf, so despite being smart, he struggled with everything. Ben was pleased with both the disability and the struggle, instilling my brother with shame and anger. And since my brother often directed that anger at its source and rebelled, he did end up on the receiving end of the scary physical abuse a few times. As a side note, I in turn experienced the traumatizing physical abuse from my brother, with the added bonus of no validation from either of my parents. They chalked it up to sibling rivalry. He was incapable of recognizing our suffering even when it was physical. The house we lived in from 2003 to 2009 had an original, as in from the year 1869, curved mahogany staircase, which was slippery. My mom slipped and fell down the last 10 feet once. Ben ran in screaming about whether the stairs were okay. Another time we were about to head out. Unbeknownst to me, he had put the trash can on top of the fridge to keep the dog out of it. So I went to open the water bottle. It fell and hit me in the head. I saw stars. I was crying, leaning over the counter because I couldn't see straight, and I thought I might faint. All he had to say was, "It's time to go. Stop crying. You're fine. Let's go." I maintained perfect grades. I was involved in loads of sports and extracurriculars and had some musical and artistic talent. Logically, I know all these things I should keep in my self-praise vault, but because he either didn't acknowledge my successes or flat out insulted them, like the time I drew a horse for an art contest and won. He told me it wasn't realistic. I can't see them as such. Nothing I ever did was good enough for him, so it's never good enough for me. I don't even draw or play music or write or anything I used to enjoy anymore. I never heard him use the word love for anything or anybody. I know that my attempt at compliance with his expectations was both fear-driven and love-seeking. I was taught to hate myself. It was such a relief when my parents finally divorced when I was 17. He finally lost his family as a consequence of his behavior. Around the same time, he was also asked to resign from the architecture firm at which he'd been employed for over 20 years, and had even made partner. Enough of his colleagues and subordinates submitted complaints. A couple of years later, he was asked to leave the job he'd gotten, heading up the architecture division of an engineering firm. Of course, that one he rationalized away by verbally abusing engineers again. He eventually had to declare bankruptcy, which you can imagine was a huge blow to his ego, seeing his fantasy becoming a millionaire crumbling. Like I said before, I decided he was toxic and could not be in my life without trying to control me, so I went no contact. I went through kind of an emotional awakening after this and started recognizing my self-destructive behaviors, such as surrounding myself with other toxic people, as well as displaying what I now know were my own narcissistic traits, like raging out when I was anxious but didn't know it. I've broken down a lot of my coping mechanisms, and I'm a raw nerve now. I experience nearly incessant suicidal ideation. I suffer from complex PTSD, experiencing dual depression and severe anxiety. I currently live in a shitty city in the Bible Belt. All the therapists either want to drug me or talk about Jesus. I haven't found a counselor who can help me develop coping strategies. I'm mostly concerned about the anxiety. It's crippling. I no longer rage out. I know when I'm anxious and how not to take it out on other people now. But I have panic attacks frequently, often with no discernible trigger. The anxiety causes insomnia, which exaggerates my anxiety and depression. It's a vicious cycle. I've tried mindfulness, exercises, distractions, but this hasn't proven helpful. Not to mention the fact that my depression often interferes with my motivation. I really just want to retain myself and not be afraid all the time. Again, I only educated myself on cluster Bs and had the aha sperm donor is a narcissist moment a few weeks ago. So perhaps this isn't enough time for that information to be helpful in my recovery. But I wondered if you could offer any advice. Rachel. Well, Rachel, in the first month since discovering narcissism, you ended up on my channel wanting to get your story out. You're moving forward. Talking about it is the first step. Being able to find some place you can talk about it is a major part of that step. Like I said, way too many therapists don't know what they're doing here. They want to medicate, they want to talk about Jesus or whatever the hell it is that you're dealing with. The anxiety and depression is something you'll be dealing with for a long time, if not for the rest of your life. It gets better with no contact. Since you're new to this, I'll say what I've said in many of my other videos. Okay? You were abused for decades. You're not going to get over this in a day or a week. You're not. It takes time. It takes a lot of time. And it takes time being no contact. You've experienced this for decades. It's going to take some time to unravel this. You're not to be expected. You can't put the pressure on yourself that I need to be over this right now. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. You are at the very beginning of this process. And the longer you stay no contact and you keep talking about things, you are going to discover things you thought were true that you never would have even have questioned before, now have to be completely reanalyzed. You are going to learn things about yourself and your own life, and you'll be able to see it going forward for what it actually is without all the manipulation and all the gaslighting. And you're going to see many things that you were ignorant to in the world, things you never considered. Because it's impossible to get better with these people breathing down your neck and continuing their abuse. My advice to you, number one, is to stay no contact and to keep looking into yourself and keep telling these stories, because you're going to get some answers in them. And in those stories, you're going to get your answers. You don't go to therapy for your problems. You go to therapy to find out whoever fucked you up. Because if you understand that, if you understand who they are and what they were doing, and that their tactics were nothing more than grab bag tactics that all narcissists use, they lose their allure, they lose their power. You see them for what they are. You're not unique. You're not special. You're not smarter than anybody else. You're just a common, stereotypical narcissist, and you're not any of those things I thought you were. You have no special power over me. You are completely full of shit. And one other thing. Too many stories that I have read, either from the narcissist is some kind of professional, a professional academic, a professor, a doctor, a psychologist, themselves. Education has nothing to do with narcissism. Nothing at all. You have dumb narcissists, you have smart narcissists, you have educated narcissists, you have ignorant narcissists. That's just the way it is. The educated narcissist loves to pretend they're superior to anybody else. But you know what? It's fucking academia. It doesn't impress me. It doesn't impress me. Education, degrees, all that shit doesn't impress me. It shouldn't impress you either. But it's real easy to get caught up in it if you got somebody who has a professional license, a professional degree, like an architect or a doctor or God knows what, and they throw that in your face. But you know why they're throwing it in your face? Because they're really fucking insecure about it. Because like I've talked about in other videos, these are people who are faking it. They are faking it. And they get by blaming everybody else, talking bad about everyone else, like your father did with the engineers. But as it turns out, eventually people get sick of the narcissist, and then their life begins to unravel, which is exactly what happened to your father. He's getting his just desserts. People get to the end of their line and say, you know what? Done. And all that validates your childhood. The narcissist spent years and decades destroying you. Don't expect to be fixed overnight, because it's not going to happen. It takes a lot of reflection, a lot of revisiting, and a lot of talking about it openly to people who understand. Thank you so much for your story. I hope it gets better for you, and I wish you luck on the beginning of your healing. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any advice or or opinions in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a narcissist you'd like to expose, a topic you'd like me to cover, you know what to do with the PayPal and my email links in the description box. I'll have the video right back to you. And again, once again, I'm out of stories, so send them on along. Zolly Matthews, thanks for watching. See you all again soon.